unfair, because you've been subsidized as a network operator to build your network. You've gotten either a tax break or you've gotten
Halo Sobat Kompor, jumpa lagi dengan saya Parlin dari Hotel Raffles lantai 11 ruang library. Kita akan menginterview salah satu tokoh internet dari Afrika, South Africa tepatnya. Namanya adalah Nishal. Moga-moga beliau bisa sedikit merangkap bahasa Indonesia, karena kan bahasa Indonesia ada sedikit pengaruh dari Sanskrit juga. Hopefully he can catch, Nishal can catch, because at least 10% of the language is Sanskrit, which is basic of Hinduism, I believe, yeah? Hindu language also, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so let's start. But before we start with first questions, Nishal, can you tell our audience who are you, and what is your background, how you become involved in the internet industry or society?
Sure. Fantastic. Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's great to be in Jakarta. It's my first time in Jakarta, second time in Indonesia, and it's fantastic to be here. The meeting has been fantastic, and I really like coming to this event. My name's Nishal Goburdan. I'm an internet analyst at Packet Clearinghouse now. I started working in the internet community as an accident, actually. I was training as an economist out of university, and I thought that this internet thing was quite interesting, so I'd like to go and understand more about it. So I'd go and work in a call center at an internet service provider for a year and maybe learn a little bit, and then I'll go on to my real job, which is I want to be an economist. And after working in support for 6 months, I was promoted to the head of the support team, and I just fell in love with the internet industry. So I've been an economist pretending to be speaking BGP and all of these technical things for the past 27-ish years now. And the amazing thing is people listen to me, so that's fantastic.
So you still don't have a degree on any internet or technology?
I thought about doing my CCNA back in like 2001, but then it just got too busy and I never got to it. So no, I have no computer science related.
So still the certificate of background, still the economics, yeah?
Yeah.
Any correlation you can see that?
Well, I mean, nowadays I spend a lot of my time talking to people about peering and the value about peering, and I find that I talk a lot to regulators and policymakers. And when you speak to regulators and policymakers, they're not really interested in the technical bits, right? Because they understand that the technical bits are managed by the internet and the internet service providers and the engineers there. And you can't talk to a policymaker and say this is what BGP does. But explaining the context of interconnection and how that works to them in terms of economics is a lot more interesting, because they understand that and they understand the value to the economy and how it's going to change things. So I would say it was an accident that I got into this environment, but it's working out quite nicely for me now. I'm enjoying it.
I see. Yeah, because when we do interview, a lot of people that not really in the technical background, but yet they perform actually. Yeah. So before the first questions, tell us about the PCH. What is it?
Sure. So PCH, Packet Clearinghouse, we've been around for a long time now. I think in internet terms, we're probably one of the grandfather organizations on the internet. PCH has been around for 30 years, 31 this year. And we've been this non-profit that has been supporting the core of internet functions, which means that we've been supporting the build or teaching people how to build and run internet exchange points across the world. We've been teaching people how to build and support DNS systems across the world. We probably carry over, I would imagine, about 2/3 of the country code CCTLD DNS today, and we're present at multiple internet exchanges. We also help with cybersecurity coordination, and we help with internet governance coordination at country level. Last year, we made the big jump from being a US-based non-profit to an intergovernmental organization. So this is really exciting for us, because it means that we can work across the globe. We have fewer limitations placed on us right now, and it's sort of recognition of the value that PCH has been bringing to the space for the past 30 years, and understanding that the work that you do is not limited to a particular government, but it's critical and to the operations of the internet and making things better. I like to describe us as, everybody knows the UN and the Red Cross. So I like to say, we're like the Red Cross, but for networks.
Oh, okay. So you think that is the right analogy, no? The Red Cross and VCCS, or just?
Well, I mean, I like to think we help out in the way the Red Cross does with
Okay.
internet. I can give you lots of stories, but then we'll fill up your podcast with just stories about how we've been doing crazy things across the world. Good things, crazy things.
It's like CERT kind of thing.
We help to coordinate certs. We don't necessarily have. We don't necessarily run certs on our own, but a cert largely becomes the contact point and how to get to people in an environment where you need assistance. So because we've been doing this for a long time, and because we've got contacts in a lot of countries, we actually sort of front the certs for a lot of small developing states, particularly small nation states, where they might be looking for operators on the ground, or they might be looking for somebody with router enable somewhere.
Yes.
And because we've done work in that environment, or we've traveled there, we've taught, we know people there, it's possible for us to find folks, so we can make those connections. So that's the cert value we provide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that you attend this Peering Asia because you're invited as a tutor for the peering tutorial sessions, right? So can you elaborate a little bit about the briefly about the your session? During your session, what did you give to
Sure.
the participants?
So I love peering. I think peering is fantastic. It's one of my favorite things about internet technologies today. In addition to working at PCH, I also help run the community exchange points in my country. So if I'm not talking about peering during the day, I'm actually helping peering at night in South Africa as well.
Okay.
So I spend all my time doing peering stuff, and the little spare time that I have, I like to volunteer at exchanges across the world as well. I really believe in the mission of community-run internet exchange points, because I think that that's what's important. When the APIX team and the Peering Asia team were building the content for the tutorials, the Day Zero tutorials, one of the suggestions was to try to explain peering in a way that non-technical people would understand, because it's not just techies that attend these meetings.
Become a lame language.
In layman's language, right?
Yeah.
The idea is that you've got to be able to get people to relate to it.
Yes.
So, the challenge is to talk about peering without using the words BGP, and get somebody who's not a technical person to understand. So that was my role. My role was to start the peering day tutorials, and to get people to understand why peering matters. So that was the title of my presentation. And the approach that I took to it was to get people to understand the value that's attached to peering in a way that affects them directly. And the approach that I like to do is to talk about the money, because I think that at the end of the day, the network operators are really, really interested in wanting to understand how to improve their bottom line.
Yes.
So if you can take the message to them in a way that they understand, and in a way that is actually really significant to them, then that's useful. So my approach in talking about peering is to immediately talk about how it affects the bottom line, but then to look at it purely from not purely from an individual perspective, but from a more holistic point of view, from what is it, now that you've understood the savings that it does for you personally, what are the larger savings that it brings to your community? What is the knock-on impact that it can bring into your economy, and whether that economy is the city that you're in, or that economy is a national economy, right?
Yes.
Those savings are still there, those savings are tangible, those savings are easily identifiable, but it's often not a connection that people make. They don't always connect the fact that I'm progressing and I'm benefiting out of this, and at the same time everybody else is benefiting, and wait, there's a national value attachment added to this as well. And there's two slides that I have in the presentation where I always, when I'm talking about them, I watch the audience carefully, and then you'll see that light bulb moment going off in somebody's head, and then okay, yeah, they got it now. So that was nice. It's nice. I gotta say, I love teaching about peering, and I love talking to people, and I can absolutely say that at least I saw that light bulb going off in quite a few people in the audience, where they made that connection and they understood that this isn't just something that I'm doing for me. There's national value attached to that.
Yeah, I realized that also during the presentations. I find out that because during the early days, IIX is just 12 ISP, but at that time, 1 megabit per second international link is $10,000.
Wow.
Yeah, at the time. and then because they are just 12 company, then start people also applying and have an email, right? So just imagine that you are my neighbors, just cross over the street, but because there is no IX, your email should go to US first before came to your, right? So, and it costs, I don't know, kilobyte, but if you divide it by $10,000 still, right? So for newest generation, it might be like take it for granted, right? You don't feel the pain anymore, right? Because so can you elaborate more? Is it because you said that, as you said, that this capital that going out from the country, right, because of this traffic, right? Is it like a trade of currency trade?
Okay. So I can absolutely relate, by the way. The Johannesburg Internet Exchange Point was established in 1996. And I said wow to the $10,000 because I guess that's probably about what it cost us as well. And I remember that at the end of the first week, it was doing about 512 kilobits a second, which,
yes, it's broadband already.
28 years ago,
it's broadband.
it's nothing, right? Your phone is doing more than that today. But 28 years ago, it was a big deal.
Yes.
And it was fantastic savings. And so we share a common background there. And it's exactly as you say, the users of the network today have gotten so used to the idea that the infrastructure works, that the internet is a lot more stable than it used to be 28 to 30 years ago,
yes,
that they forget that it's not just taking care of how I get to the big content that I'm trying to get to, but it's taking care of every little thing that matters. And I think along the line, we've kind of, along the way, a lot of people have forgotten that the reason we build exchange points is really to be able to exchange local traffic, because it's an exchange of local traffic that does many knock-on effects in our economy. It's training local people, right, and building that knowledge economy that we want, so that we're not losing our smart people to bigger, better jobs in other industries. It's saving money, as you pointed out. It's not the export of our capital or the losing money that's leaving our ecosystem, but rather the reinvestment on savings. It's the reinvestment in savings on bandwidth that would otherwise have been purchased to support the needs of what we want. That's a national issue, right?
Yes.
And when you get the internet operators to sit down and understand that it's not just one network that's paying for transit, it's everybody else that's doing it. It's everyone that's doing it. And the collective sum of what you're paying is often a significant amount of money. You'll get complete mindset changes. I know networks, when they first start peering, one of the peering tactics is not to advertise all of their routes because they think that it's going to make them better than their competitors. And then on a whiteboard we show them what happens and how, for example, not advertising your routes actually costs you money because of how the traffic has to return to you.
Yeah.
Complete mindset change. I mean, I've been in tutorials where networks who just didn't want it to work in this manner saw the value and the savings that they were going to get using numbers that they provide to me on the whiteboard, and in the classroom they go, okay, we're going to fix this right now. So getting people to think about it not just in an individual manner, but in like what actually is important for us as a national objective. I think that that's an important thing to do. And I think that if the service providers are not going to be willing to get to do that, and I don't just mean the internet service providers, I mean the service providers of whatever services that you're doing, whether you're providing media services or banking services, whatever service is going to be in the economy. If you can't see that you sending your packets overseas is costing your economy money, then I think the government is going to see that very quickly, because governments are skilling up to start to understand how the internet works and how internet technologies work. And I know this because, for example, they come to us and they say, run peering tutorials with us and teach us how this works. And so, having the regulator and the government come down to you and say, hey guys, you're doing this wrong, I think that's a position that service providers don't want to be in, right? We don't want to be told we're doing the wrong thing. So if we can fix peering, if we can get peering working in a more efficient manner, that's a better thing for our industry.
Yeah.
Especially when the regulator doesn't have to tell us this is what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, okay. On regulation part, it will be another topics. But there's previously in the IX also, I mean in Indonesian internet, there are three things that we usually, or two lah, basically local content also. We still have local content because, for example, not only about emails, some website also local access, but there are news. News is quite popular, so that you access, which is a local news that you cannot replace from other country, right?
Absolutely.
So, but there's an asymmetric of traffic on that because most those popular is from which side of the world. So how do you think that we can neutralize this asymmetric, or at least make it peer-to-peer in terms of interconnections? Because peer means that we are equal actually, right? But there's asymmetric on the traffic. How do you see that? So the other side will see us as a peer also.
So I think, in the 90s and the early 00s, there were those peering wars, and those peering wars were tied around what do they call not contention ratios, peering ratios, right? I'm changing traffic with you, and the traffic exchange is usually 1 to 1, which is quite okay. 1.5 to 1 is generally okay, but when it became 2 to 1, people started saying no. That was I think that was in a very different internet, right? And I think that's important to understand that, because the internet in the 00s and in the 90s was really about dial-up and getting people. And when you have dial-up, then you have, any content that you're hosting locally, but you also have the users that are connected to you, and you want to pair the users to the content because all of that is inside your network.
Yes.
But since then, the internet's evolved dramatically, right? We've replaced dial-up with, say, fiber, and that's easy because that's just a medium change. But we've gotten people connected at scale via fiber, which is fantastic, and you've got tons and tons of eyeballs. But as you've built an eyeball network, that doesn't mean that you've necessarily grown your content along with your network. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you've built an eyeball network, you've thought that you've had to build a hosting base as well. In the old days, it was very different. In the old days, it was, we've got spare bandwidth during the night, so we'll have a dial-up service because dial-up service works at night, and people don't dial up during the day because it's expensive. But during the day, we will have a hosting business because the hosting business is what's going to make us money, and you were balancing that.
Yes.
Today, I think certainly the statistics of your exchange point would show it, that the traffic patterns have swung the other way. It's night that's busy and daytime that's empty, right? Everybody's got always on internet. So this idea that I've got a network that's empty all the time doesn't exist. So that's important to understand. And it's important to understand that, as I said, the networks aren't, they're specialized. I should say it that way. The networks are specialized. So you've probably got a network that's built to generate eyeballs. That's it. Like, look at the mobile networks. The mobile networks literally probably only have eyeballs, at least in my country. They have very little content on them. So arguing with an operator about saying, we're not changing an equal amount of traffic, the peering ratios don't work anymore. I mean, I've been doing this longer than I want to admit. The grey is showing these days. I can easily say I haven't heard a reasonable debate about somebody arguing in favor of having peering ratios, at least in the last 10 years, definitely in the last 10 years. So I think that we've grown out of that cycle, because imagine going to a content operator and saying, I don't want to peer with you because your ratios are too high. Those arguments are happening in some places, right? In South Korea, for example, they're asking the content networks to now subsidize the build of it. I think that largely that's probably not unfair, because you've been subsidized as a network operator to build your network. You've gotten either a tax break, or you've gotten investment from government, or you've gotten you're building. You have a business plan that says, I'm going to be building this. Now you're going to the content networks and you're saying, guys, I want to double subsidize my network. So that's double dipping into the pool, and then that's not necessarily fair. However, I also think that there's an important role for the content operators to play as well, and that is to recognize that they can't just keep pushing content from afar into networks. They have to say, well, how can we work with the local network operators to bring the large amounts of content that we have to your local environment at a cost that is equitable to the local network operators? Just expecting everybody to pull it in from, data center in the US West Coast or something, that's not fair to anyone.
During the peering is I agree with you. It's not really happening anymore. Now we are seeing peer-to-peer talking about how we can solve the at least the technical and the economic side of the peer. Okay, I heard that you want to talk to Michael Takekuchi, our counterpart in APG, about the IIX. You said that IIX have largest what you call it, prefix in.
Well, you certainly have a lot of members, right? You
Yes.
have a significant number of members, and I think that as a community exchange, it's a fantastic story to tell. And so I was curious, firstly, about how you've built it. Firstly, as a pseudo techie, I'm curious as to how you've built and expanded this, because we're following the same model now. APG is a Service Providers Association. In my country, in Johannesburg, we have the JINX, the Johannesburg Exchange Point, that was started and run by the Service Providers Association for a long time. So we share similar histories, right? We're both service provider run exchange points. We've slightly changed the way and who and how can connect to Johannesburg, but the history is certainly the same. And I was curious on the build mentality that they've used, the expansion models that they've used, etc. I certainly think that for an exchange the size of IIX, you're not promoting yourselves. You're not talking about the great value you've done. I mean, it's fantastic. I was telling Michael, I'd love for you to come to South Africa and tell people how you've managed to scale a community exchange into such a huge thing, because I think we get fed different messages in the market, right? I'm fully in support of community run peering, because I think that peering is something that should be owned and run by a community. But at the same time, there's this growing idea that exchanges can't work if they're not community, and that's absolutely nonsense. For me, it's always about what is it that your community wants. If your community believes that a community-run exchange point services our needs, that's fantastic. That would work for you. If your community believes that they want the exchange to be run by some third party, that's fantastic, but really it's the community that decides. And for me, the fact that the Indonesian community has stood up very proudly and said, no, we're quite happy with the idea that we have a community-run exchange point, I mean, that's a testament of that you should be proud of, really.
Yeah, we did actually. That's why if you saw our channel, I hope you subscribe also.
I will.
We interviewed Barry Green, which is
Yep, I know Barry.
Yeah, you know Gary, right? We interviewed. He's one of the supporter of the IX initial, and Pak Sanjaya also.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we're proud of it. But I don't think that we have time to discuss. Some issue about the community, why it doesn't what you expected. That we understand that we should, because back to 15 years ago when I also active in APG before, I promoted that with. Is it or Google put this CDN in any ISP? Why don't you just put it in IX, right?
Exchange.
Yeah. So there are some argument about it and why it happened, because that's what the time that the peering is not working yet, because it should be equal symbiosis mutualism of benefit, right? I have the eyeballs, you have the content that you want to share to the internet, right? And our users also want this what you call it, the traffic to you, and also the applications, right? So that's not working yet at that time. That's why I asked you about the asymmetric of traffic.
Well, we have a saying at PCH, and that is that the function of peering is to reduce the average per bit delivery cost of the internet, the APBDC. So that's our patent pending acronym. And for me, having content being provided out of a centralized location absolutely does that. It reduces the cost. And it reduces that cost if the cost that a network has to pay to get connected to the exchange is a feasible and reasonable cost to the internet exchange, the participant. If it's not, the internet exchange will know about that, because the participant will simply get that content from elsewhere. So that's a great signal to do it. The problem, I think, is that people forget that when they all go out and try to look for a cache from whatever content network operator, they're actually hurting themselves in the long term. Because then you end up with, if you've got an environment with 20 operators, and you certainly have, 1,000 members here?
1,300.
So okay, in Java it was about 300 or so, I think?
More than that.
Yeah.
Almost
So
600.
if 200 of those guys each have their own content cache, there's 199 times extra bandwidth that you're spending that probably isn't necessary.
Yes.
You're losing money as an economy. That's what
Yes,
it comes
correct.
down to. And whereas if you could centralize that, and you could get them to work together and say, well, what would it take for content operator to build a POP here, and then from that POP deliver infrastructure? Because certainly certainly you have the population to support that. You have the need to support that, especially if, as I said, there's 200 of these caches out here. And that's, for me, is the part that the content operators need to realize that, wait a second, we have a responsibility as well. While we're profit-making environments, we also need to be in a situation where we, play fairly in this environment. Because if we don't, then, you're flipping the coin onto what's happening in South Korea, and that's not an internet that we want. We don't want to have an environment where the networks are saying, we're not coming in here because it doesn't work for us. It's got to be a symbiosis. It's got to be we'll build the networks, we'll get the users in here, but you need to be able to bring the content and deliver it at a cost that's equally that's acceptable to us.
Yeah, but in the recent discussion, actually, in the peering, I see that it's not that at the previous 10 years ago. Now the tone is quite peer, I can say. But I don't know, what's your experience? Is it? Or still have this unbalance of thinking from the content and the network provider?
I think the content operators have made it very clear. At least one big content network operator has said that it is their goal to be within 15 milliseconds of every end user, because that's how they want to build and design the network, and that's what they feel is optimal for the delivery of their content. And that's a fantastic number, because if you think about it, if I want to be 15 milliseconds away from peers, and then if I'm looking at uncongested circuits, I'm probably looking at a distance of between, depending on the fiber, 300 to 600 kilometers, which means every 300 to 600 kilometers, there's probably going to have to be a content delivery point. In a geography like yours, which is spread out and wide, it means that A, there's going to be tons of internet exchanges that develop over time, but also B, tons of places where content networks, at least the ones that subscribe to this value, are going to say we're going to put infrastructure. And that's going to take probably years to develop. And that's okay, right? We're not asking the content networks to say, do this tomorrow. Take your time to invest and start off in the bigger cities and work your way out to the edge in the second tier cities, etc. But I think that them realizing that they're heading down that path where they're saying we're going to be building, or we're going to need to build infrastructure. That's the first part of it. That's the key, and they understand that. They understand that well. I think what doesn't necessarily work for them often is regulations, right? And we won't discuss this here, but regulation in the market, whether or not the regulation permits the localization of that cache, and then perhaps any local peculiar rulings, like AppG saying we are now going to permit non-AppG members to get connected to the exchange, etc., etc. So those are, and what I have seen across the world is that over time those rules all get normalized.
Yes.
Right. If I'll use the Johannesburg exchange as an example, we didn't allow non-members to connect up until about 2008. And then the mindset flipped, and the mindset was like, hang on, we actually want peers to get connected to the exchange, for foreign peers, because the minute they do, it becomes cheaper for us to get content from them, and us to deliver content to them and deliver users to them. And when we presented the savings model to the community, they were in overwhelming support of saying, fine, go ahead and do this. There was no issues. So I think that some economies move faster than others, at least in terms of how they build their peering ecosystems, and what I've seen across the world is that they all effectively normalize to their value to the point where it says peering is open for everybody. It's even in really, really how should I say this, challenging markets, this is what peering is migrating to, and I think that you'll get there over time as well.
Yes, that's good. Actually, you also mentioned about not many ISP is not good. Yeah, but too many ISP is not good also. So what is the not many and numbers of the many? Too many and not.
So, I think it's difficult to say this is what the number is going to bring to you, right? I wouldn't want to quantify it in terms of saying this is the number of internet exchange points that you need in an ecosystem. But I think it's important to understand why you're building internet exchange. And I think, understanding why the first internet exchange was developed, it's easy enough. Everybody understands that. The second internet exchange probably came about because people didn't like the first, or they wanted redundancy, for example, right? And they felt that this was too big a point of failure, and that's easily understandable. 3, 4, and 5, I don't know. I mean, maybe there were policy issues at one exchange that somebody didn't like, and they decided that we can build another exchange and fit some of those policies. But certainly, I mean, by the time you start getting to number 4, unless you're doing, and we're talking about in a city, right? By the
same
time
city,
within the same city, you really have to ask yourself, is this adding value? Because the problem is that every exchange that you create this expectation that networks are going to connect, and every time a network has to connect, it costs them money. And if connecting to all of these additional exchanges isn't fixing the APBDC, it isn't lowering the cost of the operation of the network, then the networks are not going to want to connect. So my advice is always to say, well, before you get to that point, ask yourself, why are you building an exchange? What problem are you trying to solve? And is the problem you're trying to solve something that could be done within the constraints of your existing peering ecosystem within that city, right? Across a country, it's completely different. Across a country, our standard answer is to say that you want internet exchanges at every major city in your country. And it's important to understand that not all exchanges are the same. If some exchange doesn't have hundreds and hundreds of gigabits a second or terabits a second in today's network, that's perfectly okay. If the exchange in a third-tier city is doing, 20 gigabits a second of traffic, which is not a lot, but it's making the operation of the networks in that city cheaper, then it's a win. Then it is effective, and effective is what we care about, right? At some point, perhaps it'll grow larger. At some point, perhaps it'll attract content, but that doesn't matter. What matters is it's serving the function of making it cheaper for those networks that connect there, and if it's doing that, it's a win. We get very distracted by big fancy meetings. We get very distracted by marketing to say, if you're not doing a terabit a second today, your exchange is a failure. And I think that that's absolutely the wrong message.
So it's a warning, at least, quote unquote, to all of at least in one city now in Jakarta, we have a lot of ISP. So let's think about it. Let's discuss together. Yeah.
you certainly have a lot of internet exchanges in Jakarta. I think it'll be interesting to see how they all work out. But I mean, other cities do as well. There's a lot of internet exchange points in Amsterdam right now. I don't understand why somebody would want to build some of the exchanges that I see that exist. Some exchanges are hobbyist exchanges. They like tunnel internet exchanges, which, we don't really consider an exchange. So, those for me are niche and not real. So I guess that they'll stay for as long as their project stays on. But, exchanges also fail. There's a long history of exchange points that have come up, run for a couple of years, and then become unsustainable and have fallen apart. So while I'm not wishing for any exchange to fail, I also think that if the exchange can't add value in the ecosystem, then its natural path is going to be failure. And that's why exchanges should be constantly asking, what are we doing to address what is it that our members want?
Yes, that one. So let's sit together and do the checklist about why we build it and how we can optimize, right, together.
And for me, this is an important point about why community exchanges are so important. Because a community exchange inherently cares about what the community wants. You're driven in your goals, you're driven in your decisions by your community. So if we're not working for you, something is wrong. Either you as the community are not telling me what you want, or I'm not delivering on it. And, those are two easy problems to identify, right?
Yeah.
And I say this as somebody that not just believes in community exchanges, but it runs a community exchange. And I think that every community deserves a community exchange, because if you can take care of your community needs, you're going to not have this problem where you have, a number of exchanges in a city.
Okay, good. So, you have been here like 2 days?
I think about it.
So, what is your experience? Can you tell us what's your?
I love it. If I was actually telling a friend, if I could speak the language a bit more, I could easily see myself spending more time here. It's a great place. I mean, I as I said, it's my second time to Indonesia. I loved the first trip. I'm loving it here as well. Vegetarian food's fantastic now that I know how to identify it. Thank you. So,
but we have a lot of vegetarian food here.
Absolutely.
You wanna go, right? At least you go. You ask for pecel. Yeah, it's a salad kind of Indonesian local salad with peanut sauces. Or gado-gado.
Gado-gado, that's easy.
Yeah. Or ketoprak. Or karedok. So all is like similar salad.
But I think the people are also friendly. And I mean, this has always been my experience in Asia. Whenever I've had to do work in Asia, most of the people are genuinely friendly. And I love that. But for the language barrier, don't worry. We still can speak.
No, a little bit language, English language. So daily language we still can. At least by point or body language still
Yeah.
can help you for the food.
Easy to find ways to communicate with people.
Yeah. So how about the social evening? Any particular comment?
It was fantastic. I loved the dances. I've always loved Indonesian dancing. It's fascinated me. As we were talking here about it on the walk in here. I was lucky enough many years ago to see I forget the name, but the peacock dance, and it still rates as one of my all-time best experiences ever, having seen a live performance. It was absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much to the organizers for arranging that.
Thanks. ID Nog? Have you ever heard? Or
I mean, I know what a nog is. I can imagine ID nog.
Yeah. So perhaps in next year we will have this in July. Usually July, 4th weeks of July.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully maybe we can invite you or you come over as a speaker, whatever, at that time.
I would love to. If we can fit it into my calendar, I would love to. I'd love to come back and add value to you.
Sure. Thanks. And we can send Michael Takaguchi to Johannesburg.
I would love for Michael to come
and
to
then
speak.
just leave it there before he got skinny. Then just leave it there. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry,
I think I'm not the best model to talk about for that, but we can certainly try.
Okay, good. Before we end this interview, is there any that you would like to convey a message specifically about the Peering Asia?
I have to say, Peering Asia is a wonderful meeting. We've got 2 days worth of meetings. I was busy on day 0, so I didn't book meetings on day 0. And in all of those slots, in all of the days, in the number of half-hour slots that we had, I have exactly 3 slots that are free, and this is one of them.
Okay,
so it's incredibly busy, but it's fantastic because the people are committed to what they're doing and they're engaging. So I love it. I absolutely love it. It's my second time to be at Peering Asia, and I'm definitely planning on being at Peering Asia next year as well.
Yeah, we have 50 or 70 tables actually, and all days full.
Booked constantly. Yeah.
Booked constantly, and even. Actually, for breakfast or other meetings, you ask for meeting at 8 a.m. Sometimes it's very reluctant. But just for this Peering, you need to wake up because you don't have any chance anymore. It's only 2 days, right?
Yeah. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nishal. Thank you for having this interview with you. Hopefully, see you soon again, at least next year for ID Nog. We'll invite you and keep in touch with you. Okay?
Hopefully, inshallah.
Thank you. Demikian Sobat Kompor, interview kita dengan Om Nishal. We address usually Om. Om is uncle.
Oh, okay.
In a slang of Indonesian is like Mr. or Bro.
Okay.
Yeah, it to make you more connected. Basically. Okay, terima kasih. Sampai jumpa lagi. You can say sampai jumpa lagi.
Sampai jumpa lagi. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.